On February 25, 1942, the United States military fired 1,400 anti-aircraft shells at UFOs over Los Angeles and hit absolutely nothing. Over 1 million witnesses watched it happen. Radar tracked the objects from 120 miles offshore. Searchlights locked onto them, and artillery crews fired for an hour straight. When the smoke cleared and the sun came up, not a single object had fallen from the sky. No wreckage, no bodies, and no explanation. The government story changed 3 times in 48 hours. First, they said false alarm, then Japanese aircraft, then weather balloons. They've stuck to that last story for 83 years. Welcome to Arnie's Brain Train. I'm Alex Arnold, and today we're covering the Battle of Los Angeles, 1942. But before we dive in, disclaimers. If you don't care about these, or if you just want to skip ahead, just find the timestamps and skip ahead or fast forward about 60 seconds or so. So, disclaimers. Why are you using AI images? Because I don't have a budget and I'm here to present and teach history. I'm not trying to win awards for cinematography. Plus, honestly, some of these AI renderings are actually pretty cool, and some of them are hilariously bad in ways that make me laugh. So, either way, they illustrate the point, so the AI images stay for now. If that's a problem, you're watching the wrong channel. Maybe you don't believe in UFOs. Great. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I don't even know if I believe in aliens or not. What I do know is that something unexplained happened over Los Angeles in 1942. The military couldn't shoot it down, and the official explanation doesn't hold up. That's interesting to me. So, whether you think it was extraterrestrial or something else entirely, the facts are the facts. Read the sources yourself. They're in the pinned comment and in the description. And finally, some of you will be chomping at the bit to call me a conspiracy theorist. Maybe I'm just reading the declassified military documents, contemporary newspaper accounts, and congressional testimony. Again, it's all linked below. Verify everything. I'm not really taking sides in this debate. I'm presenting information and letting you decide what it means. And before someone mentions it, yes, there was a 2011 movie called Battle Los Angeles about an alien invasion. That movie wasn't based on this actual 1942 event, but the real Battle of Los Angeles was the main inspiration for the concept. So Hollywood knew this story was interesting enough to make a blockbuster about it, but the story is completely different. With all of that said, you can be mad in the comments, or you can learn something today. Your choice. Let's get into it. All aboard. Let's set the stage. It's early 1942, and America is on edge. 79 days earlier, December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Over 2,400 Americans were killed. The Pacific Fleet was crippled, and 18 ships had been sunk or damaged, including 8 battleships. The Arizona alone took 1,177 sailors to the bottom. Just like that, the war that had been over there in Europe was suddenly very much at home. So, the West Coast immediately goes into defensive mode, not because of paranoia, but because it's strategic reality. Japan just proved they could strike American territory with devastating effectiveness. California's shipyards, aircraft factories, and oil refineries are all high-value targets. Cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego represent critical industrial infrastructure. So, blackout drills become routine. Anti-aircraft batteries go up on rooftops and beaches, and the 37th Coast Artillery Brigade is on constant alert, manning searchlights and gun positions around the clock. Then, February 23rd, 2 days before the main event, a Japanese submarine surfaces near Santa Barbara and shells an oil refinery. The Elwood oil field attack causes minimal physical damage, maybe $500 worth of equipment, but the psychological impact is massive. It proves Japanese forces can strike the American mainland. They're here, right off the coast. So when air raid sirens start wailing over Los Angeles 2 nights later at 2:25 in the morning, all of this context starts to matter. People know that this threat is real. Total blackout is ordered, and every light in the city goes dark. Over 1 million people sit in their homes, listening to sirens and the thunder of anti-aircraft guns. Here's where it gets sporty. According to the official military report, documented in the LA Times from February 26th, radar picks up an unidentified target approximately 120 miles west of Los Angeles. The object is tracked moving steadily toward the coast at what operators describe as a slow, deliberate pace, somewhere between 200 and 300 miles per hour. At 3:16 a.m., the 37th Coast Artillery Brigade opens fire. Over the next hour, they unleash over 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition into the sky. 12-pound shells exploding between 9,000 and 1,800 feet. Witnesses describe it as continuous thunder. The ground shakes, windows rattle, and shell casings rain down on the streets. Searchlights sweep the darkness, crisscrossing the sky, and multiple batteries positioned across different parts of the city independently lock onto targets and coordinate their fire. These are trained artillery crews following targeting protocols, tracking objects, calculating firing solutions, and engaging what they believe to be enemy aircraft. Thousands of witnesses report seeing objects in the sky. Some describe a large, slow-moving craft that seems to hover. Others report multiple smaller objects moving in formation. Several witnesses claim the main object is disc-shaped or oval, illuminated by converging searchlight beams. The LA Times publishes a now famous photograph the next morning. It shows searchlights converging on something in the sky. Over 24 beams focused on a single point with what appears to be an illuminated object at the center. The photo is taken by LA Times photographer Harry Weston and published on the front page with the headline, "Army says alarm real." Here's what doesn't make sense. Despite firing 1,400 shells, not a single aircraft is shot down. Zero. No wreckage and no enemy combatants captured. Nothing crashes into the Pacific or the city, although shrapnel from American shells does kill 5 civilians and damages buildings, and 3 people die from heart attacks during the chaos. The military fires at something for an hour straight and hits nothing. Or, more accurately, multiple witnesses, including military personnel, report seeing shells explode directly on or near the objects. They see the flashes and hear the impacts, but the objects remain airborne and unchanged, continuing their course across the sky. At 4:14 a.m., the guns fall silent, the all-clear sounds, lights come back on, and over 1 million Los Angeles residents emerge from their homes with the same question: what just happened? So what was the government's official explanation? The morning of February 25th, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox holds a press conference and calls the entire event a false alarm caused by war nerves. According to Knox, there were no planes and no attack, just jittery soldiers shooting at phantoms. This does not go over well. There are over 1 million eyewitnesses, searchlights tracking objects, radar operators reporting contacts, artillery crews engaging targets according to established protocols, and newspaper photographs showing something in the sky. Newspapers across the country pick up the story. The LA Times editorial board points to their own photograph as evidence. Congressman Leland Ford of California formally requests a congressional investigation, stating that either enemy aircraft has penetrated American airspace or the military had engaged in one of the worst cases of jitters in U.S. history. Then Secretary of War Henry Stimson contradicts Knox the very next day. In a press statement documented in the February 27th edition of the New York Times, Stimson claims that unidentified aircraft, possibly as many as 15, launched from Japanese submarines and flew over Los Angeles as a reconnaissance mission. So, which is it? False alarm or actual aircraft? The military's position shifts again later. The official explanation that eventually settles into the historical record is this: weather balloons released earlier in the day triggered radar contacts, and nervous anti-aircraft crews opened fire on these balloons, creating an escalating cycle of confusion and mass hysteria. So, weather balloons. 3 different explanations in 48 hours. False alarm, Japanese aircraft, weather balloons, and that pattern is what we really need to pay attention to. Let's discuss why the weather balloon explanation has problems. We'll take a look at the evidence piece by piece. The radar data. Weather balloons don't show up on 1940s military radar as sustained, trackable objects moving at calculated speeds. According to the initial reports, radar tracked the object for over an hour, calculating its approach from 120 miles offshore. The operators described a clear, consistent radar return, not the weak intermittent signal that you'd expect from a weather balloon. Weather balloons also drift erratically. They don't approach from 120 miles at sea and travel in a straight line toward a major city. Radar operators in 1942 were trained to distinguish between aircraft, weather phenomena, and equipment malfunctions. The searchlight coordination. Multiple searchlight batteries, operated by trained military personnel stationed at different locations across the city, independently locked onto objects and tracked them. The famous LA Times photograph shows over 2 dozen searchlights converging on a single point. Battery commanders communicated via field telephone, coordinating their targeting. When one battery acquired a visual target, they'd relay coordinates to adjacent batteries. The photograph shows lights from Santa Monica, Inglewood, and Long Beach all converging on the same aerial position. Weather balloons move erratically, catch wind currents, rise and fall unpredictably. They don't maintain a course steady enough for multiple observation posts to track simultaneously like that. The photograph. That LA Times photograph shows searchlights illuminating what appears to be a large disc-shaped object. The military later claimed it showed nothing, just beams crossing an empty sky, creating an optical illusion. Photographic analysis shows an object reflecting light at the convergence point. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, an optical physicist and former Navy researcher, analyzed this photograph decades later and concluded that the image shows a structured object of substantial size at approximately 10,000 feet altitude. The light reflection patterns are consistent with a solid three-dimensional object, not an optical illusion. The witness accounts. Thousands of witnesses, civilians, military personnel, police officers, firefighters, air raid wardens, all reported seeing objects. Not just lights, not just searchlight beams, but structured craft. Katie, a resident of Santa Monica, told the LA Times that she saw a big floating object like a blimp moving very slowly overhead. CJ Anderson, an air raid warden in Hermosa Beach, reported at least 3 objects flying in formation, moving south along the coast. Army personnel stationed at Fort MacArthur reported engaging a large craft that appeared to be taking hits but showed no signs of damage. Their descriptions were remarkably consistent. Large, slow-moving, disc or oval-shaped, apparently undamaged by anti-aircraft fire. So, what's the pattern? Radar tracking, visual confirmation by trained observers, photographic evidence, consistent witness testimony. This is what's called a radar visual case in UFO research, one of the strongest types of evidence because it combines multiple independent verification methods. All of it points to something that definitely wasn't a weather balloon. So if it wasn't weather balloons, what was it? Let's look at some of the possibilities. Japanese aircraft. This was Secretary Stimson's initial claim, and it makes sense on the surface. Japanese submarines could carry small reconnaissance aircraft. The I-25 submarine had bombed Oregon forests in September 1942 using a Yokosuka E-14Y seaplane, the only aircraft to bomb the continental United States during the war. But no Japanese records document any aerial mission over Los Angeles in February 1942. We eventually captured extensive Japanese military archives after the war, and the Japanese Navy's operational logs make no mention of submarine-launched reconnaissance flights in Southern California. Strategically, it made little sense. Why risk revealing your submarine capabilities for a reconnaissance mission that would accomplish nothing except alerting the Americans to enhanced coastal defenses? The Japanese would have had every reason to document such a mission if it occurred. It would have been a significant psychological warfare victory. But there's nothing. No orders, no after-action reports, and no pilot debriefs. Maybe it was experimental U.S. aircraft. Some researchers have suggested that the objects were experimental aircraft being tested, and the military staged the attack to cover up a crash or malfunction. But the problems are obvious. Why would the military fire 1,400 rounds of live ammunition at their own experimental aircraft over a densely populated city? Why risk killing civilians, which actually happened, to cover up a test flight? And why maintain the cover story for over 80 years if it was just a domestic test gone wrong? Now, the US did conduct experimental aircraft tests during World War II, but they happened at remote proving grounds like Muroc Dry Lake, now Edwards Air Force Base, or White Sands, New Mexico, not over Los Angeles at 3 a.m. Or maybe it was something unidentified, which is our third option, something that we just can't explain. Multiple witnesses described the main object as disc-shaped, large, some estimated from 100 to 200 feet in diameter, slow-moving, and seemingly unaffected by anti-aircraft fire. Despite taking what appeared to be direct hits, witnesses reported seeing shells explode against or immediately adjacent to the object, but it neither fell from the sky nor changed course. The description matches what would be reported in similar cases for decades afterward. Objects tracked on radar, visually confirmed by multiple observers, demonstrating flight characteristics beyond known human technology, and exhibiting apparent invulnerability to conventional weapons. The behavior, slow, deliberate movement, hovering capability, apparent disregard for anti-aircraft, and it doesn't match any aircraft technology from 1942. Not American, not Japanese, not German. Nothing in the historical record suggests any nation possessed aircraft capable of sustained flight at 200 miles per hour while absorbing direct hits from explosive shells. So, we're left with something unidentified, something the military couldn't shoot down, and something that the government has been trying to explain away for 83 years. Let's quickly talk about what happened at the top levels of government. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt absolutely knew about the Battle of Los Angeles. You don't fire 1,400 rounds over a major American city without the president being briefed. Roosevelt received daily intelligence briefings from both the War Department and Navy Department. An incident of this magnitude, involving contradictory reports from his own cabinet secretaries, would have landed on his desk within hours. The fact that Knox and Stimson offered completely different explanations within 24 hours suggests either confusion at the highest levels of government or deliberate misdirection. Here's why this matters, though. The official explanation shifted 3 times in 48 hours. False alarm, Japanese aircraft, weather balloons. That's not the behavior of an administration that knows what happened and is being transparent. That's the behavior of an administration scrambling to control a narrative about something that they either don't understand or don't want to reveal. And Los Angeles wasn't an isolated incident. In the weeks following February 25th, there were multiple reports of unidentified objects over other West Coast cities: San Diego, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. All of them resulted in blackouts and alerts. Throughout the 1940s, there was a significant uptick in military and civilian UFO sightings, like the famous Foo Fighters reported by Allied pilots during World War II, which were strange lights pacing aircraft over both European and Pacific theaters. Some UFO researchers, including Richard Dolan in his book UFOs in the National Security State, claim that FDR established a secret committee to investigate these phenomena, a precursor to what would later become Project Sign in 1947, Project Grudge in 1949, and eventually Project Blue Book in 1952. There's no smoking gun document proving it, but there is a pattern. The Battle of Los Angeles established the template. Step 1, immediate contradiction between official sources. Step 2, shifting explanations until one sticks. Step 3, dismiss witness testimony as unreliable. Step 4, classify documents and limit investigation. Pretty simple, really. This pattern repeated with Roswell in 1947, the Washington, D.C. UFO flap in 1952, the USS Nimitz encounters in 2004, and countless other incidents throughout the decades. In 2023, the US government admitted through the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office that there are aerial phenomena we cannot explain using known technology. Navy pilots have recorded objects moving in ways that defy physics, like instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic speeds without sonic booms, and transmedium travel from air to water without losing velocity. Radar systems track craft with no visible means of propulsion, performing maneuvers that would generate G-forces fatal to human pilots. The Battle of Los Angeles might have been the first time the US military encountered something they couldn't explain and couldn't shoot down, and they had to figure out how to tell the public. The pattern that started in 1942 is still playing out today. When the evidence doesn't fit the narrative, change the evidence or change the narrative. This connects to something larger that we've talked about on this channel before, regarding how institutions handle information that doesn't fit their established frameworks. Whether it's the lost biblical texts like the Book of Jasher or the Book of Enoch that mysteriously disappeared from the official canons, or unexplained events like the Battle of Los Angeles. The institutional response tends to follow similar patterns: initial confusion, shifting explanations, and eventual dismissal or reclassification. So, consider this possibility. What if cover-ups aren't always about concealing known information? What if they're sometimes about concealing ignorance? What I mean is this. What if the government's biggest fear wasn't that the people would learn what happened, but that the people would learn that the government had no idea what happened and no ability to stop it from happening again? In 1942, fresh off Pearl Harbor with the entire nation on edge, that's a truth that the government couldn't afford to admit. The people in charge weren't in control. So here's what we do know. On February 25th, 1942, the US military fired 1,400 shells at something that they tracked on radar, locked onto a searchlights, and engaged with coordinated anti-aircraft fire. The government's explanation changed 3 times in 48 hours. Thousands of credible witnesses saw something in the sky. Radar tracked something, and searchlights locked onto something. And whatever was in the sky that night, 1,400 anti-aircraft shells couldn't bring it down. The Battle of Los Angeles sits at the intersection of verified historical fact and unexplained mystery. The event happened. We have military records, newspaper accounts, photographs, radar logs, and thousands of witnesses. The physical evidence is undeniable. What we don't have is a satisfactory explanation. And that matters because it shows us this pattern of institutional response to unexplained phenomena isn't new. It's been happening for at least 80 years. Alright, Brain Train, that's the station for today. As always, all my sources are linked in the description below. Verify everything yourself. The LA Times archives are public, the military reports are declassified, and the witness testimonies are documented. Do your own research and draw your own conclusions. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment telling me what mystery you want tackled next. And finally, tell me what you think. Did the US military fire 1,400 shells at UFOs over Los Angeles and really hit nothing? The evidence says yes, but we also deserve better answers than weather balloons. I'm Alex Arnold. This has been Arnie's Brain Train, and remember, the world isn't always this simple, but it's always this interesting. All aboard. I'll see you there.